the presentation. Get it.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending the Engaging the Assessment Process Part 1. My name is Naomi Shamatutu Zakunu, and I'll be moderating this session. Our speakers will present for about 30 to 35 minutes, and we'll hopefully have time for a Q&A at the end. And we will end this session promptly at 2:35, so that you can go into other sessions as well. If the presenter is not able to answer all of your questions, please contact the presenters at the email that they will list in their presentation, and or the Office of University Assessment by email. As a friendly reminder, this session is being recorded, and when you registered for the conference, you provided us with consent for recording. If you would prefer that your likeness not be published, please feel free to turn off your camera. From here, I will turn it over to the presenters for introductions and their presentations. Good afternoon, Dr. Walker and Ms. Kiwanis Matier.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Naomi. Okay.
So are you seeing the slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
All right. So I'll go ahead and get us started. Thank you for joining us today. We have a two-part presentation on engaging the assessment process. And it's really to just do a deep dive into something that you've heard all day long, but we'll continue to reiterate why assessment is important, looking at its links to continuous improvement and accreditation, in addition to what the assessment process at FAMU looks like and how to put together the components of the assessment process. And we're doing this and tying it to the fact that if you're going to receive a full payout from investment, you really have to know what the process is you're investing in. We've got to know what the pieces are, because until you have a deep understanding of the pieces, how much time they take, how much effort they take, you won't really know how to allocate resources to them. So that is what we intend to do today. Deepen that understanding of the process so your unit can get a better idea of what resources have to be invested and to what extent. And I am Kiwanis Matier, and I'm joined today by Dr. Phyllis Walker, my colleague from over in the College of Social Sciences, Arts, and Humanities. So we have four main objectives with our presentation today. As I mentioned, understanding the connection between assessment and continuous improvement, understanding the connection between assessment and accreditation, our assessment process at FAMU, and how to engage the assessment process, which really just means what are we looking for? How do we put that content together? So assessment and continuous improvement. Anyone who desires greatness knows that continuous improvement has to be a part of that process for pursuing greatness. My predecessor, Dr. Melanie Wazinski, she often mentioned Apple and used their example of, the iPhone didn't stop at the first one. They didn't, do the iPhone one and say, okay, we've peaked, no need to do more. We're at what, iPhone, I don't even know at this point because I refuse to buy another one, but we're pretty far down the road. And that is because, greatness isn't just something that you stumble on. You craft it, you hone it, and the continuous improvement process is a part of seeking that level of excellence. So our continuous improvement process is really just our process for documenting the evidence that's going to link our planned actions with our realized improvement. So in class, you really focus on at the individual level, documenting progress on whatever your competencies are on. At our level, for the purpose of the Office of University Assessment, we're looking at the program or the office level and how you make progress in achieving your desired competencies. And your planning your report is going to be your tool for making that happen. When we talk about assessment and accreditation, we're really talking about the core process in standard 8.2. And as Dr. House mentioned earlier, it's woven into other standards that is really key in attaining and sustaining our accreditation. It's actually codified as a core requirement of SAC-COC accreditation. So it's our vehicle to routinely evaluate our instructional programs, our university services, and it's going to help us be a more effective institution by ensuring we're giving attention to assessing how well our units are operating, how well they're accomplishing their stated goals, because those stated goals should be aligned to the goals of the organization and the organization's mission. And assessment is just the process through which all of that happens. So specific, I mentioned SAC-COC standard 8.2, which I have been living with for the better part of the past year, Dr. Walker.
Yes.
as our office is working on standard 8.2A, student learning outcomes for educational programs. And anyone else who's in their 5th year reporting cycle or coming up to it, the life that I'm living. But it is really key because it's kind of how we ensure that we're fulfilling that informal contract between our organization, our institution, and our students. So we've got some program level outcomes that we're saying, as you participate in this program, you're going to achieve these desired outcomes. And our assessment process is really the process for ensuring that we've identified those outcomes, and we're looking year over year to ensure that students are achieving those and try to highlight our areas for growth, developing strategies to address those areas for growth, and then coming back and reflecting on the impact of those strategies. So 8.2A or 8.2, the institution identifies expected outcomes, assesses the extent to which it achieves these outcomes, and provides evidence of seeking improvement based on analysis of the results in the areas below. So we have 8.2A, that's our educational programs, 8.2B, general education, and then 8.2C, our academic and student services.
Okay, so the SAC-COC accreditation process recommends that colleges and universities follow a process that's outlined here in this framework. And this is what FAMU has used. This is what we've done. We use this as a standard tool to facilitate the effective operation of our assessment process following this framework. So what we've done is, of course, we have the STARS, the FAMU STARS assessment, or the assessment
Framework.
model. Mm-hmm. And this model is how we make sure we're implementing the SAC-COC assessment framework. So we have steps 1 and 2 of the SAC-COC framework, and they align with steps 1 and 2 of the FAMU STARS approach. And this information is captured in the assessment plan. Then we have, with SAC-COC assessment framework, we have steps 3, 4, 5, and 6. And these align with the STARS approach of steps 3, 4, and 5. And this information is captured in our assessment report.
So our FAMU STARS assessment approach, the Office of University Assessment works with all educational programs of all degree levels, regardless of their course modality or location. All of our administrative and educational support units to make sure they adhere to this one standard process. So that process comprises our assessment plans and reports, as Dr. Walker mentioned before. They're all due at the same time annually, and that due date is September 15th to have all of that information entered into Nuventive and ready for our offices auditing and review for potential revision, to give you any kind of feedback, all that kind of stuff. So our assessment plan.
Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Our assessment plan requirements. So as I mentioned before, we have 3 different reporting units. There are our instructional programs, our administrative and educational support units, and then our deans. So I'm going to give the requirements, but they're going to vary a little bit depending on which reporting unit I'm referring to. And then even some subdivisions within the reporting unit. So for our objective statements, we require our instructional programs at the undergraduate level to give us 5 objectives. We require that at least 3 of those are student learning outcomes, but we really encourage our instructional programs to own the student learning part and leave any other kind of performance and research related stuff to the dean's level reporting. So 5 for our undergraduate programs, and my Florida SUS peers, 3 of those have to come from our academic learning compact. For everyone else, that just means that at least three of them have to be related to critical thinking, discipline specific knowledge, and communication. Now, our graduate level programs have to give us at least 3 outcomes. They do not, and we don't specify where they have to pull from. Most of them still align with the academic learning compacts. And we still put that emphasis on student learning outcomes over performance or anything, performance related outcomes for the whole department or program or college and school. For our administrative and educational support units, they also have to give us 3 objectives. Our dean's level reports, they have to give us either 5 or 6 objectives. And that requirement is linked to if they have some sort of licensure exam, then they have to incorporate as a sixth objective their performance and their activities related to the licensure exam. Moving on, we require each of our units to give us strategic linkages. So those are just those connections that they make back to our FAMU strategic plan, their own college, school, or division strategic plan, our PBF metrics, our gen ed outcomes, if it's an undergraduate program. It's just the area where we ask them to link, okay, how do your program objectives, which should be aligned to your program goals, feed these larger areas of the institution?
Can I just make mention there too that that's an important piece, because there is a SAC COC standard that wants to ensure that everything that we're doing in our units as well as academic programs are connected to the mission and the goals and objectives of the institution in general. So the Nuventive platform and making those linkages within that Nuventive platform, that's how we provide evidence that what we're doing in our individual departments and programs and units is actually, those things are actually connected to the mission of the institution. So that's very important that you do that.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Walker. Our assessment measures are just the tools that we're going to use to gather information on our objectives. For each objective, we ask you to provide at least 2 assessment measures, and at least one of them has to be direct. So you can do a mixture of direct and indirect if you'd like. You can do, double directs if you like. You can do multiple assessment measures and do any variation of the numbers, but we need you to have at least 1 direct measure. And we ask you for that because we need some kind of artifact showing us what your students can actually do. What if they, achieve this competency that you're calling out in that objective. So at least 2 assessment measures per objective, and at least one of those has to be direct. Your criterion is just the benchmark that you're setting for success. what's the targeted performance level that you're looking for on the specific assessment measures that you've included. It's got to be quantified, and we'll get into what that looks like a little bit more later, but each assessment measure has to have that benchmark of success or the criterion. And finally, it's optional now, attachments at the assessment plan phase. We ask for those so we can get a better idea of how you plan to collect your data. The hope is that if there are any issues with misalignment between your plan data collection tool and the objective, we can catch it at the plan phase by reviewing your attachment. So that's why it's optional right now. We actually do not rate it at the plan phase. We only rate attachments at the report phase right now. I want to put emphasis on the for now because
Right now.
we might change it. And on to the assessment report. So the assessment report, we're going to ask you for a result summary for each of your measures. That result summary should have your overall statement of if you achieved your criterion or not. It should give a summary of the numbers. So just overall, if you told us that X amount, that X percentage students are going to hit this benchmark, then you come back and report clearly how many actually did achieve it. So you've told us if you've met it or not, but now you're going to break down what that looks like, how many, achieve that benchmark. We also ask you for a breakdown of those numbers by course modality. And that's going to look like you telling us how many students were assessed and how many were successful by if the course was face-to-face, online, or hybrid. Okay. In addition to just that summary level information, we're also asking you for analysis related to your results. So tell us about the contextual factors that were happening at that point in time. Paint us a picture of what those results mean, what those numbers mean. For each measure, we're also asking you for an improvement narrative, and that improvement narrative should just point to, so what's next based on the numbers that you got and the analysis that you provided related to those numbers. What's next? How are we going to improve? Are we replicating this measure for another year? Because we want to make sure that we see those results again. I know Dr. House mentioned earlier about, the valid and reliable. And if you're able to see the results over repeated cycles before you decide to move away from a measure, that's something that we want you to capture in that improvement narrative. At the report phase, attachments are required, and those attachments should give us some sort of evidence of the result that you've reported. So if you told us that your students all rock this assignment, then you should have some sort of evidence attached, de-identified, that proves that claim or backs that claim up. And finally, the overall reflection. There's only one overall reflection provided because it's actually you going from the measure by measure level to look at overall, what does this assessment report mean? Where does my department, where should we go from here? And you're going to use that hopefully to set the stage for your assessment plan.
Okay, so
let's take a brief. Do we have any questions? I see one question in the chat, so let me expand that. You have an academic assessment committee, correct? If yes, do committee members review both academic assessment plans and reports? So at this point, our institution level assessment committee reviews reports for us, not plans yet. The goal is to get it to a point where they can review both, but at this point, it's just reports, and it's been that way, I'd say, for the past 4 years. I can't speak to what happened before then, but yes, just reports. You're welcome.
Hello, Kiwanis. I have a question.
Hey, Dr. Williams. Yes.
Hey. Yes. Okay, so my question is about strategic linkages, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I'm wondering is I guess how subjective it is, because I guess the strategic linkages were kind of set up in the system, Nuventive, and then I don't know, like somehow some were missing from like one year to the next. But I guess what I'm wondering is, is if, let's say you have a assessment champion, if you will, and they change, right? And so someone goes into the system and says, okay, let me create these links, right? Is there like I guess a way to be consistent, even if, I guess, positions change? I don't even know if that question makes sense.
It's okay. I am going to talk about linkages and hope that we hit your answer, your question, in the midst of me providing a generic answer. So you mentioned consistency. So well, let me go back. Okay, so when we're talking about quality, and I know people get a little bit nervous when we start saying we're going to evaluate the quality of your strategic linkages, but
Mhm.
it's really just to say that we're going to make sure that if you have an objective around oral communication, that you didn't try to tie that to organizational effectiveness and transformation. That's what strategy 5 on the strategic plan.
Mhm.
So when
Okay.
we talk about the quality of connections, we're really speaking to making sure that everything that you have linked actually makes sense with what you've linked it to. So
Okay.
that's that piece of it.
Okay.
For our instructional programs, you all are more than likely going to link to strategy 1, which is student success. Yeah, so I'll leave that there. So now when you talk about consistency, and I'm going to share something really quickly, and Dr. Walker, you could take it back over after this.
Okay, so I need to,
You don't have to do anything right now.
Oh,
Just in a
okay.
moment, you're going to restart the share when I say you can take it back over.
okay.
So you should see the outcomes, the objective/outcomes map in Inventive should be on your screen right now. And that's the area where you all create these linkages between your objectives, that's the columns, and either your instructional program goals, we do the drop down, our strategic plan, the performance-based funding metrics. At some point, the new college/school strategic plans will be in there, but this is the screen where you'll make those connections. So ideally, or theoretically, let's say discipline-specific content is an objective that you all added this year, right? So when you go in, you make that connection between discipline-specific content, and we're going to say that falls under goal 1.1 of our new strategic plan, because that's something we're saying that by you having a grasp of your discipline, it's going to contribute to you being retained because you know the content, and you're comfortable you're comfortable with the content, and you're able to progress through your program and eventually graduation rate, so on and so forth. So you make that connection, you save it this year, boom, it's in there. Now, is your question related to someone trying to unconnect this?
Well, I guess I'm saying, like, if for some reason, say there's some kind of loss of data, right? So maybe is there like another location for the mapping of what we're seeing here? Because like it's in Inventive, right? And so is it any place else? And should there be like someone within the instructional program that would be the best person to connect, or make the linkages, and then that should just be kind of transcribed by other people
Got you.
that work November. Yeah.
Got you. So, and I'll let Dr. Walker speak on this from the faculty end, but I'm going to say, so this assessment is a smaller piece of all of that larger stuff that you all are doing as far as planning and instruction in your area. So you all collaboratively have developed your objectives, And ideally, there should be conversation around if this is an objective, if this is a program goal, and this is an objective related to this program goal, then how does that funnel up to what the institution is doing overall, as evidenced by the strategic plan? So I say that to say there should probably be some kind of document kicking around in your area where you all have mapped out, this is our programmatic goal, this is how it feeds like our college or school strategic plan, and this is how that feeds the university strategic plan. It doesn't have to just be over here in Nuventive. And if you find that it is over here in Nuventive, that might mean that's a point for collaboration between your area and our office to see how can we get that integrated into the documents that you all house over there. So
Okay.
that's thing number one. Now, so I'll say beyond that, well, actually I'll pause. And Dr. Walker, did you want to weigh in?
The piece that you were talking about related to the losing of data, that I'm assuming you're talking about data that you put into Nuventive, trying to make sure that you don't lose that. What we do in CESA is we have a file, and the assessment liaison will whatever has been uploaded into the Nuventive portal. We have a file in the assessment liaison's office as well that she pulls from to put that information in there. So if we were to lose something there, we could always go back to the assessment liaison's folder and get that information, or vice versa. You might also consider a shared drive in your program where all of the information would be uploaded, as opposed to just putting it in the folder of the computer of one individual. And that might be another level of protection of your data if you upload it to a shared drive. Was that the question?
Correct. Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And we've got a question in the chat that actually goes to helping with the answer for your question. Nuventive, you can generate a report in Nuventive that shows all of your strategic alignments in the report. So if you want to, at the end of your assessment cycle, go ahead and download that full report for that cycle and save it, on your department shared drive or OneDrive, however you all do that, then you can have that there. So if there's any loss of information in Nuventive, you have it documented somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks.
No problem. And I believe it's Dr. Leche.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right.
Leche, Maria, yes.
We've seen each other before. It's nice to be in a different venue together.
Yeah,
If you don't mind, I'm going to call you Maria. So.
No, you can call me Maria anytime. Dr. Leche was my grandfather, not me. So I just wanted to tell you, Kwani, that a lot of the recent changes revisions that we had in our assessment system were mirroring what you're doing at FAMU. So in the STARS model. So we are very thankful for all the information that you have shared a couple of years ago in a conference we had here, and I was still in the College of Education. And then when I moved to work with Dr. Brophy, I mentioned some changes, and then he mentioned what you did. So I went back to the presentation. So I just wanted to add that we are kind of getting some of your good work and bringing to our context.
We do not believe in recreating the wheel. So if there's anything that we can supply or we can partner and collaborate on creating something, we're more than happy to do it. what is the
Absolutely.
phrase about the high tide raises all boats? We believe in that wholeheartedly over here. But yes, I echo your sentiment about the wish list to have the committee engaged in rating both the plans and the reports. It's like a crawl before we walk. So we're still trying to formalize the reporting in, but I'm confident that once we get that firmed up, then we can go ahead and get them involved in the assessment plan rating.
We'll keep talking about that.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the requirements? Anything about continuous improvement? Because I know we're about to kind of move into breaking down the components in the next portion of the presentation, which is an intense practice. It's an intense exercise, I'll say. But I want to make sure I don't have any questions on the basic stuff before we move on. Going once, going twice. Okay, Dr. Walker, you can take over with the characteristics.
All right, so let's do this again. So, okay, do you see the characteristics of the assessment component slide? All right.
Yes.
So we're going to now move into how we actually build out the assessment plans and the assessment reports. So what has happened is that we start with the assessment plan outcome statement section, and this is where we identify what we want our students to be able to demonstrate at some point in the program, whether it's at the beginning of after their first semester, or at the end of the program, or by the end of their junior year. But at some point of the program, we're going to talk about what are those specific learning outcomes that we want to see our students exhibiting. And each of the components that make up the assessment plan that we're talking about right now, that Kiwanis just went over a minute ago, or a little while ago, they have some characteristics that the rating committees will be looking at as they're making a judgment or rating your information that you're putting into the Nuventive portal. And these, when you look at, as you're looking at the characteristics as we go through them, think about how some of these, some of these characteristics can actually help drive your conversations with faculty. When you're looking at the characteristics and then talking to them, you can, talk about some of these specific characteristics that have to be included as appropriate. So let's look at the outcome statement. This is your student learning outcome, or your program level outcome, or some people call them objectives. So these characteristics, we're looking for them to be clear and specific. We want them to be written in terms of what students should be able to do or demonstrate using those appropriate action verb sheets or the various action verbs. We want these statements to be succinct, a succinct description of the content, the skill, the attitude, or the behavior that you're looking for. And the statement, the outcome statement, should also identify the students to be assessed. So we should know, who are you assessing in this statement.
And I want to pop in really quickly here, because I know we talk a lot about students and whatnot, but these guidelines apply for our ADESUs and our deans also. Just, sub in the term for who your stakeholder group or your audience is. So if it's, I'm thinking of alumni affairs, if it's, an objective related to the alumni associations or the alumni themselves, like I know it says students throughout, but this does apply to whatever population of people that you're working with. And as a matter of fact, in the example that, one of the examples Dr. Walker is about to mention, it's from the DESE side, and we're not dealing with students in that one. We're talking about assessment liaisons.
Right.
So the advice still applies across the board.
Exactly. So here's some example, and we want to give a shout out to Dr. Williams at the workshop that we had last weekend, I believe it was. She made some suggestions about actually providing these exemplars to help those of you who are putting this information, building these plans and building these reports. Having some examples of the wording would be beneficial. So Dr. Williams, thank you. And we listened to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So we do have outcome exemplars here. Upon completion of the junior year, students will demonstrate the ability to create and discuss a cohesive series of original artwork. So if you go back and look at the characteristics, do you see where these areas are addressed? Is that statement clear and specific? Is it written in terms of what students should be able to do? Okay, so they will be able to demonstrate the ability to create and discuss. Okay, is there a succinct description of the content, the skill, attitude, or behavior? And does it identify the students that will be assessed? Did we capture everything in that statement? Are you checking? I guess we'll check the chat.
We don't have anything in the chat.
Okay.
And this, these are examples. They're not perfect. So feel free to chime in, because this is, I think, an important part of the process as we navigate and kind of negotiate in real time. What do we see? What do we think is missing? Any areas where we lack clarity? This is the time for all of that. And we have purposely built this out into 2 sessions, so we afford you the opportunity to have those discussions.
Exactly. So yes, feel free to interrupt at any time. So the other,
We have a comment that they seem measurable and observable. Great.
okay, good. Good.
I also, I think it's pretty clear what you want your students to be able to do. They need to create and discuss a cohesive series of artwork. So I think we have 2 and 3 pretty clearly outlined there.
And then
I think you have, I'm sorry, Dr.
Go ahead.
Walker,
No.
but you have number 4 clear too. That it's to be the junior students, it's to be
Yes.
The assessment liaisons. So that part is clear too.
Yes, because that ADESU, upon completion of the assessment process, assessment liaisons will demonstrate the ability to synthesize assessment results to create targeted improvement to their academic program. Okay. So those are questions about how you would write up your student learning objective or program objective. Okay.
Okay.
Oops. Here we go. There we go.
All right, strategic linkages. So we want to make sure that you are connecting your objectives to the FAMU strategic plan, your own college/school strategic plan, your programmatic goals. If you have a specialized accreditor, please provide us with their competencies if they're not already in the system or if they get updated at some point, because we can put those in the inside Nuventive, so you can then link your objectives to those standards or those competencies for your specialized accreditor. And then we ask that if it's relevant, you link to the PBF metrics, the president's goals, or our general education outcomes. Now, in order to make the connection, the strategic linkages, you need to make sure that you have you're written out your own goals, your own objectives, so on and so forth. So you can just make sure everything is mapped together from beginning to end. We talked about this last week, where if you have a specialized accreditor, we do not have a problem with you double dipping. You can make your assessment planning and reporting for FAMU work for both us and for your specialized accreditor, because we want this to be meaningful and we don't want the quality of one to suffer in service of the other. So if you have that in place, please make sure that you've aligned your FAMU assessment plan and report to your specialized accreditor reporting that you do for them.
You have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Oh, for the first session, okay. Okay.
So we're going to pause here, and when we pick up, we're going to go into the assessment measure, but we want to, like I said, honor everyone's time. So if you have questions, feel free to give them. If you have to pop out and take a water break or a bathroom break, we're not going to start session 2 until 2:40. Almost messed that time up. So this is the time for questions, but if you don't have any questions, if you just need to pop out for a minute before we start the next session, please feel free. We will start from the assessment measure at 2:40 p.m. For my folks who are sticking around, one of the things that I think has been kind of underscored across a couple of sessions today, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Walker, is that it's really important that we're having this time as a program or as a unit to meet and discuss our assessment data collection process, our numbers as we go along. And, instead of it just being on one person at the end, it's something that happens throughout the year as a group. Does anyone have that structure in place that they like to share and talk about that happens in their area? Because we like to we like to borrow and share where we can.
I talked about ours in CISA in my earlier presentation, where we have the assessment liaisons that facilitate meetings or assessment discussions within their different areas. And all of the department chairs have been encouraged to put an assessment item on their agendas for their regularly occurring faculty meetings within the department. And we also do that within the college, our regularly occurring faculty and staff meetings. And then the monthly reporting out day of the assessment liaisons during our Council of Chairs meeting, we are asking those liaisons to bring back to us discussions, some of the results that they have come to as a result of the discussions that they're having with their faculty and staff. So that kind of encourages them to do it, because when they come to those meetings, they want to be able to contribute and not just look like we're not doing anything.
So you actually have evidence through your meeting minutes of you all discussing assessment.
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably I'll probably talk to you about that soon.
Okay. We should have, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And I saw a question about, does Nuventive generate a spreadsheet showing the alignments? You want to talk about that?
Oh, wait, hold on a second.
Is that,
Which one? What did you say?
does Nuventive
Yes,
generate?
I
a
mentioned
spreadsheet?
that you can generate a report in Nuventive. So our reporting changed a little bit, and we're actually gonna have a training session on Nuventive now. How it looks is still relatively easy to navigate. I say relatively because in my opinion, it's easy to navigate, but the alignment and how things are structured did change some. But anyway, in the reporting function, you can create this 2-column report, and it actually shows the strategic linkages on there. So it's something that you can download as a PDF and save and have, forever, to show you in 2021 how you saw your objectives aligning with our strategic plan.
And then just suggested the assessment item in the college faculty meetings at a meeting with our assessment coordinator yesterday. I volunteered to attend their meetings to discuss the assessment process.
Yeah, just
Right.
what you, very, very similar to what you just described, Dr.
Mhm.
Walker, with like, I think it will help with,
Yeah.
especially with the new faculty who are doing it for the first time, in
Yes.
understanding all these components that are important to be clear in the report. So I'm glad it gave me a lot of validation that you're doing the same thing. So thank you for sharing.
And I think because we were doing it on demand, right? People would reach out and say, hey, can you all come over to our meeting? That's how we were doing our new assessment team members training. That's how we ended up showing up at these college and school and department meetings, was very like ad hoc requests. Sure, we'll come on over. I think one of the things that's going to really drive, that's really going to improve how people engage us, is us just making it standard. So us moving to that standard training is going to be 3 times a year. It's out there, people know it's out there, so they'll take advantage instead of just having to remember to reach out and ask us to do it. Now you don't even have to think of scheduling it. It's already scheduled. And I think that what you mentioned in your comment is also something that's worth looking into, just making it a part of our standard practice of, it's, the second week in July, or not July, because it's the summertime. Pick a better month. The second week in May, April. I keep going with the late months. I don't know why. The second week in February, we
Yeah.
know that CISA is having their college-wide meeting where they're going to discuss assessment. Let's plan to attend. So
Mhm.
you don't even have to ask us, and you don't get to opt in. We opt in for you. I think that's what's going to increase that engagement with the process and understanding how assessment works and just what the purpose of it is.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the coordinators, how we call our assessment liaisons, we call them assessment coordinators.
Coordinated.
I'm sure they will appreciate that, because it will take a heavy load of their backs to explain the process for the new folks who are coming. So having like this type of training or boots camp, I'm taking a lot of notes. So in a couple of years, you're going to listen to me saying again, thank you for sharing, because we're doing the same thing.
And you'll
It
be
makes
presenting.
sense. It makes sense, though. It honestly makes sense, particularly because we already align our practices across us, right? Like there's some small differentiation across institutions, but for the most part, the spirit of what we're doing is the same, because
Yeah.
we, try to create it that way. So I
Mhm.
hope to come to the next UF assessment conference and take something.
Yes, we are a little, we put the assessment conference in the parking lot for a bit, because we are having our 2024 reaffirmation visit
Mhm.
next year. So we are
Oh, yeah.
preparation.
sense.
mode right now. So, but we'll have one in the near future.
Is Dr. Miller a part of that effort?
Oh, yes, he's always part of all the efforts. He's
You
an
would-
entity within the
you
entity.
You would be surprised. I remember the first time because he was actually he taught my I think it was my measurement and evaluation course
That's his program, yeah.
over at HDOS. And the first time he came in, and he's just this very relaxed and laid back gentleman, and he just absolutely blows your mind with the amount of information that he has, and just his proficiency in really explaining it to you and making you understand. And he just comes in then at that point, I say, in his Hawaiian shirt, and just chills and talks. And
Yes. It makes everything look very easy, right?
yeah.
Juanis and Dr. Walker, it's 2:40.
All righty.
Okay, all right, so let's get this back up. Where were we?
We're at the assessment
No.
measure.
Okay, so I need to go to. Okay, what do you all, oh, no. Let's start from here. Okay, are you seeing the assessment measure
Yes.
slide? Okay, so this, trying to get this out of the way. Okay, so now we're gonna look at the assessment measure or your measurement tool. This is the next component in the assessment plan. So here's some, let's look at some of the characteristics that make that assessment measure information a little more effective. So we want to make sure that the assessment measure is appropriate for the outcome, with evidence of how it aligns with the outcome, when it will be administered, and how the assessment measure will be used. So we're going to look at all of that. We want to make sure that these assessment measures are not course or exam grades. And that's because when a course grade covers a whole lot of different things, and you, with your student learning outcome or your programmatic outcome, you're looking at something very specific. So you want that measure to connect directly to what you are measuring, not all the things. And so we don't want it based on a course grade or an exam grade unless the exam is specifically designed to measure that outcome. Okay, and there are those times.
And I want to tie that to a conversation that Dr. Walker actually had with me a few weeks ago about the objectives and the outcomes, and how sometimes when they're not, when they're a little too general, it's tough to figure out the what's next. Where do I go from here? Because it's too broad. And I'll apply that same thing for the course grades or the exam grades. With so many things tied into this one grade, it can be a bit difficult to isolate out, what do I take from here and act on?
Exactly. That's why that outcome statement needs to be very clear and succinct about what it is related to what it is that you're measuring. So if you do use an exam or some type of rubric, you need to make it clear about what portion of that exam or what portion of that rubric will be used and how it aligns with the specific outcomes. One of the things that we see, you often see, is if there is a paper and you've assigned a paper as an assessment measure for a particular learning outcome related to content that the student, you want to make sure the student knows. Well, you can't just say that if they get a 5 points or 25 points on the rubric, that is your assessment measure, because that rubric is typically measuring your writing mechanics. It may measure other things, the number of typos, are you double spacing, all of these types of things that have absolutely nothing to do with the student's knowledge of a particular content. So you would identify in the rubric what section or what specific part of that rubric is going to be used to assess this particular outcome. And it helps when you put it in your attachment, in your, what is it, the
plan.
document repository, whatever, you highlight specifically, make it clear in your statement and highlight it on your assessment tool. So when someone goes in and looks at it, they can see, oh, okay, I see exactly how this connects. So of course,
I think
go
that's,
ahead.
oh, sorry.
No.
I think that's really, exams are another place where people stumble on that a little bit. Particularly, we'll have people use an exam for, let's say, a critical thinking objective, but that exam might have some it might have some components in it that could get to critical thinking, but it also might have a multiple choice section that doesn't offhand really tie into you being able to think critically around this topic, so on and so forth. So it's really helpful to go ahead, as Dr. Walker indicated, to go ahead and show us exactly where you propose that this objective is being assessed on this exam. So then we don't ding you and make you come back into the system and do a whole bunch of work.
Exactly, and that's why that the characteristics include that it's appropriate for the outcome with evidence of how it aligns with the outcome, when it will be administered, and how the assessment measure will be used. Kiwanis mentioned earlier that you want to have at least one direct measure. You can have a lot of the student learning outcomes, the programs use 2 direct measures, but you have to have at least one. And it's good to have a variety in type of measures, but both measures have to align with specifically what it is that you are assessing. So let's look at an exemplar for this assessment measure. Section 2 of the junior, now this goes back, remember our student learning outcome that we were looking at relates to the student being able to develop and discuss a cohesive body of original work, something like that, okay? So the assessment measure for that learning outcome is that section 2 of the junior evaluation rubric, which rates the student's explanation of how the work was informed and executed. The evaluation is conducted at the end of the student's junior year. The information will be used to provide feedback to the student and determine their readiness for the execution of their senior exhibit. In addition, gaps in the student's understanding of the elements of cohesiveness can be addressed by the faculty. How is that looking in terms of addressing all of the characteristics?
And we know from this snippet, you don't know if there's a variety in type of measures. That's just kind of one of the constraints of the format today. But in looking at bullets, major bullets 1 through 3, do you see those characteristics in the assessment measure that's on the screen?
I'm going to mention something you all might not catch, but I happen to know that this particular learning outcome was their critical thinking outcome. Okay. And that, so the students' explanation of how the work was informed and executed relates to their critical thinking skills. So when I go back and look at that, and then I read how the information will be used, and we have here, the information will be used to provide feedback to the student and determine their readiness for the execution of their senior exhibit. Even though, yes, that is what they're going to use this information for, but it doesn't really tie you back to this being a critical thinking outcome. So probably in this assessment measure statement, as we're looking at how it aligns to the outcome and how the measure will be used, we probably need to also think about what is it about the critical thinking process that we would be focusing on in the rubric, and how is that information going to help the faculty deal with enhancing critical thinking skills in that student now, or in their students. I may be overthinking, because I tend to do that a lot, but when we're looking at the alignment, so that could be a question. Well, how does this, what you're using the rubric for, if you had the information that this was a critical thinking outcome with the academic learning compact, you're trying to enhance their critical thinking skills. That's really what you are assessing. So those are the types of things that when you are looking at your assessment measures and aligning them with your outcome, you have to be clear about, okay, wait a minute, what are we trying to assess? Does that, go ahead.
Was somebody else about to say something before I jumped in?
Yeah, but maybe you should go first.
Okay. I also, in the chat, I put our administrative side outcome. So just to go back and read that. Upon completion of the assessment process, assessment liaisons will demonstrate, so this is the thing that we're looking for them to be able to do. They'll be able to synthesize assessment results to create improvements. So if we know the task that we want them to be able to complete is that they can take these assessment results, think about them, analyze them, and put them all together and make some kind of improvement for their academic program, what do you think might be an assessment measure that we could tie that to?
Quantis, I'm not sure, but is it possible that we do maybe revise what we're saying in a survey or a rubric to get improvement? No, that's okay.
No, let's flesh it out.
Yeah.
Don't leave it yet. Let's flesh it out. So, and I'll use the example of the one that I put in the chats around making improvements. I would say, knowing what I know about how we use assessment, we may be able to create an assessment measure around those improvement narratives. or
Mhm.
around the overall reflections. And so that might be what our assessment measure is. Is that appropriate for the outcome? So if we know that our outcome is them being able to create improvements based on their results, is it appropriate to create an outcome around their improvement, around the improvement narratives or the overall reflections? Yes or no?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, I hear a couple of yeses. Okay. So I am in complete agreement. So now, if we were going to do that, then and this is going to take us over into the criteria, but then we figure out, okay, what's the level that we're going to target for performance? But yes, if we're thinking about just what is the assessment measure going to be, if we're tying it to that outcome, that's about being able to create, being able to take those assessment results, put them together and create some kind of improvement for the program, then yes, it would be appropriate to pull that from the to create that assessment measure around our improvement narrative or our overall reflection.
Mhm.
And then from there, you just, now that you've figured out what the measure is going to be or what your data source is going to be, then you just type that up. Probably not anything that's as long as our example, but social work
Right.
is very thorough because they have a nuanced, specialized accreditor that they are dealing with.
Mhm.
But that's as simple as what the assessment measure is. Is the assessment measure something that's directly related to that outcome?
Mhm.
Is it going to be something that specifically looks at whatever that outcome talks about? So if that outcome is about being able to create some kind of improvement based on results, then yes, it's appropriate to make that outcome, that assessment measure, something around my improvement narrative over my overall reflection. And
Mhm.
then, like I said, you want to make sure you have at least one of your measures be a direct measure.
And these are the kinds of conversations that you have to have with your faculty, which is why those conversations have to be ongoing. You can't do this in one meeting because there's so many different things, especially initially, that are going to come up where sometimes you do have to say, okay, wait a minute, we're using this measure, but this measure, this assessment tool is really not giving us the information that we need in order to effectively assess what our students are doing. And that's okay, because now you just take that information and you say, okay, now what do we need to do from here, which is always part of the process. So those assessment measurement tools are very important, and you really do have to be intentional about aligning the tool, the measurement tool, with what it is that you are assessing.
And so
So-
go ahead, Dr. Williams.
May I? Okay. Yeah, so I guess for this particular example, I'm wondering, and I don't know if you mentioned it, because I think you did, but what was the outcome? Because you're saying, is it appropriate for the outcome? But am I missing something?
It
Well,
was in the previous slide, but I'm going to copy and paste it into the chat right now so it'll refresh your memory.
the outcome that's in the plan, the student learning outcome that's in the plan related to this measure, is a critical thinking outcome.
So that outcome was, upon completion of the junior year, students will demonstrate the ability to create and discuss a cohesive series of original artwork.
And the discussion, creating and discussing the cohesive series, relates to their ability to think critically about what it is that they're doing. Okay, and create that artwork and discuss it based on using their critical thinking skills. So the question that I had was, when I looked at the information, how we were going to use the information would be to provide feedback to the student to determine whether or not they were ready for the execution of their senior exhibit. That's really not what, that's not what the student learning outcome is. We're not, the student learning outcome was not, students will demonstrate that they are ready to execute their senior exhibit. The student learning outcome was related to their ability to create and discuss a cohesive piece of artwork. So that's why I was looking at this again and I said, that's different from what we were assessing. But that, like I said, I mean, I don't know if anybody else sees that.
I guess that's what I'm seeing, and I'm just like, you know what I mean? Just trying to like get my mind in the proper context. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think just the piece that, just look at sentence 1, right? Section 2 of the junior evaluation rubric, which rates the student's explanation of how the work was informed and executed. And then let's look at that and stack it up against that objective that I just put in the chat. So if the objective is upon completion of the junior year, students will demonstrate the ability to create and discuss a cohesive series of original artwork, then based on that first sentence, where they break down the junior evaluation rubric, the specific section that they're looking at, that specific section rates their ability to discuss how the work was executed and informed. So if I look at that and compare it to that objective,
It's
they
not match.
are.
Are you saying it doesn't match?
No, I'm saying the first sentence, section 2 of the junior evaluation rubric, which rates the student's explanation of how the artwork was informed and executed, it matches the objective, because the objective is just about their ability to create and discuss artwork. That section of the rubric gets to their ability to talk about how the artwork was created and executed.
Okay.
That first sentence is fine. I think what Dr. Walker is getting to is that by the time you get to that third sentence, which is why sometimes we just have to give the information, the gist of what was asked for, because we could talk ourselves into a problem.
Yeah.
When you get to that third sentence, they're talking about evaluating if the student is ready for a senior exhibit. And that's something that, if this objective is just about critical thinking, readiness for the senior exhibit contains a lot of stuff that's not necessarily critical thinking. So by the time you get to that sentence, you start to ask questions. But if you just stop at that first sentence and say, my objective is around their ability to create and discuss artwork, and this rubric portion evaluates their ability to create and discuss that artwork, then those two are aligned. Does that make sense, Dr. Williams?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That makes good sense.
Okay. I want to get us over to the criterion, because
additionally, Quanis, that even could be part of the improvement narrative.
Yes. So if, for example, if this is what they did, they included this in the plan and it went through, and then after they got their results, part of that discussion may be exactly what we're discussing right now. And the outcome may be, we may need to look at how we're using this data, or what, they may make some changes just around that discussion.
Okay.
So I just wanted to bring that up to, so we can be aware of these types of things when we're looking at keeping what we're doing aligned with what we're trying to do. Yeah.
All right. So for the criterion, remember, that's just that benchmark or that level of success that we're aiming for. We want to make sure that our criterion is tied directly to the one outcome that we're measuring. We want to make sure that we have some kind of quantified numeric target that we are specifically calling out as our criterion. So that criterion is going to tell us like the number or the percentage of students or people who will attain some specific level of mastery. And I'll get into that in more detail in the example. If this data is available, we also want you to give us some kind of brief justification of why you set that level where it is. This is something that we're growing to. It's not necessarily where we are, but continuous improvement. We're steadily growing and getting better. So to go over this example, 75% of students will attain at least 13 out of the 16 points on section 2 of the senior evaluation rubric. Okay, so their criterion, is it tied to one outcome? Theoretically, yes, because they called out that one specific section of the rubric that talks about their ability to discuss the artwork. So that's the critical thinking piece of it. So that's in place. Did they give us a quantified target? So did they tell us a number or percentage of students who will attain a specific level of mastery? Yes, I see that there. They said 75% of students will attain that 13 out of 16 points on that portion of the rubric. And they gave us the part that we're trying to get to, which is where they talked about how they set that number that they're targeting. How do they set that target? Typically, only about half of students have successfully completed the junior evaluations. Therefore, our initial benchmark will be to get 75% of the students to successfully present. So they said they're referring to that 75% that they included, and they said typically about 50% of them actually present. So we want to get it to 75%. Now, conversely, you might set your target around the attainment level. Like historically, your students have gotten, 10 out of 13 points, but you've developed these strategies to try to help them better understand the assignment and demonstrate the competency. So you're aiming for 13 out of 16 points now. That's another way to justify the level of mastery, or another angle you can look through to justify the level of mastery that you're including in that criterion. And I know I'm moving a bit faster but it's because we have 18 minutes left and we still have to get through the whole report. So if we're flying too fast, just pop in and let us know. Over to you, Dr. Walker.
So our next area is the result summary. So in these result summaries, we're looking at the overall, we're looking at the overall statement of findings are presented for that particular outcome that clearly addresses the criterion, measure, and related outcome. The number of students, we want to see that in the sample. We want to see the number of students who met the benchmark. So the number of students who were assessed, as well as the number of students who met the benchmark for success, who met the criterion. We want to see the percentage of successful students. And this information is included by course modality. So whether it's face-to-face, distance, or hybrid, meaning that if maybe 5 out of the 10 students that did it online were successful, but face-to-face, only 2 out of the 10 students were successful, something like that. So you want to you want to be able to look at the different modalities that you're teaching or that you're using to determine, are they, pretty much the same? Are they consistent? Or are you seeing one modality having more problems than another modality? Because you would need to address that. So for programs with multiple locations, a separate result statement would be provided for each location. And then if no data was collected, we need to give an example or an explanation as to why it is not available. So this result summary exemplar would be of the 25 students assessed, 19 or 76% scored 13 points or higher on section 3 of the junior evaluation rubric, which just reached our criterion of 75%. All students received instruction face-to-face. So this is the first part, okay? That's your results summary. So we have the statement of findings are presented. That include the number of students assessed, the number of students that were successful, and the number of students by modality. And we indicated whether the criterion was met or not.
And just a reminder, major bullets 2 through 4, so the breakdown of the numbers and met or unmet, remember those are like hard-coded fields in Nuventive that, you know, it specifically asks for how many assessed, how many successful, and then it has you break down that information by course modality, and it actually forces a response. So we're doing all we can to kind of build in you breaking those numbers down like that, because the hope is once you start to see it broken down on those different levels, it'll start a discussion in your area about, okay, well, what might have driven these findings? Like Dr. Walker mentioned, if our online students in this course who take this same assignment are having a difficulty that our face-to-face students aren't having, what might be driving that? There might be an area for improvement related to that, because all of this is supposed to build, we're like scaffolding, right? To the point where we get to some kind of improvement related to this objective based on all that data we've collected. So the analysis of results is kind of the first place where you start to piece that together and lead to your improvement narrative. So you need to offer some sort of interpretation of your results related to the outcome that's specifically grounded in your desired results, so your criterion and the data that you collected. You can reference your prior year results for comparison. So if you've seen yourself trending up or trending down, that's something to go ahead and talk about in your analysis of results. It should also identify any actions, challenges, or contextual factors that influence the results. So let's say the faculty member who typically teaches this course was able to walk their face-to-face students about 3/4 of the way through the assignment, but because it's implemented later in the online portion, they didn't get to work with their students at all on their assignment. It was, you know, spearheaded by a different faculty member. That might have influenced how the assignment was explained, how they engaged with the assignment, and how they led the students to engage with the assignment. And maybe some of that was, you know, maybe some of that fueled the differences you've seen. So just any of those sort of factors that might have influenced the numbers that you saw, we want those spelled out in the analysis of results, because again, we're using those to lead us to what your measure level improvement is going to be. And the analysis should focus on any takeaways that you get from disaggregating the data. So looking at the data broken down by modality or any other kind of breakdown, you can, you know, provide in your analysis of results. Go ahead and do that, because it could help lead you to potential improvements. So we're looking for interpretation, reference to prior year results. We want to address context, and we want to consider disaggregated data. So to quickly go through the example, this is an improvement over the 2021-2022 assessment results where only 56% of the students met the criterion. That's major bullet 2 immediately. The improvement is attributed to the faculty deciding to implement additional opportunities for art majors to present their artwork and be evaluated on the cohesiveness of the visual to its presentation. So we're getting into what major bullet 3 already. We're talking about the context and what might be different. This was a means to provide more practice in presenting prior to the junior year evaluation. The increased number of presentations has also helped to understand the significance and seriousness of the presentations. However, we need to continue to increase participation in the work quality. Okay, so I see major bullets 1 through 3. I don't see a consideration of disaggregated data. However, in that previous, in the results, they said all of their students were face-to-face. So that, is typically the level of disaggregation most people kind of default to. And since all of their students were face-to-face, that's probably why there's no disaggregation, because the default way that we typically slice it up, it couldn't be sliced.
Mhm.
So in going through that, I see those 4 elements. Does anyone disagree, or do they want to add anything? Do they think anything could be fleshed out a little bit better?
Can you elaborate on when you said the default? What are you referring to?
Oh, so typically when we look at disaggregating this data in Inventive, we do it by course modality, right? If they're face-to-face, if they're online, or if they're hybrid. That's kind of what our brain turns to immediately when we start looking at how to draw comparisons across student performance.
Okay.
But in the previous slide, they mentioned that all of the students were face-to-face. So they couldn't break it down based on course modality because there was only one course modality present, face-to-face.
Okay. Is there any other way to disaggregate data?
Tons, and it just depends on what's relevant for your program. Like,
Were they
I'll
attended
use-
for a student?
I'll use over here in assessment, we often disaggregate by type of reporting unit. So we make comparisons on instructional programs versus administrative and educational support units versus dean's level reporting. That's one of the main areas where if we have to disaggregate any of our assessment data, we do it
Okay.
based on that.
And
Okay.
you could disaggregate your students by, are they transfer students? Or did they enter into your program the first year? You could look at
So,
the difference of that if you wanted to.
yeah, I'm just wondering that it seems like this would have to be thought up on the front end. You know what I mean? Because if you had a class, then, and if you said like transfer students versus, you know what I mean? Students
Well,
out of,
it could come out in your results. Like say, for example, you're starting to look at your results and a faculty member says, you know what, one of the things I noticed was that my students, my transfer students, they seem to be lagging behind. And a lot of times it's just as you look at the data, especially the faculty member that's actually doing the assessment measure, they can give a little more insight because they're seeing things. And so they may bring some stuff up in your meetings with everybody that's kind of like things that make you go, you need to check that out. Yeah,
got it. Thank you.
yeah. So
Okay.
then the next area is the improvement narrative. So these are the planned improvements. These planned improvements are clearly articulated and tied to the results and analysis sections and are within the control of the program. That's very important. We can't say, well, the provost's office needs to do this, that, and the other. No. What you're tying these improvements to over what you can control, not what somebody else needs to do. And then the updates are specific in detailing dates of implementation and where the change in the program or curriculum will occur. So we want the improvement narratives to be clearly articulated, grounded in results, have a locus of control and detail. So let's look at,
And we ask for that level of detail because we really want people to focus on actually thinking through the improvements and not just giving some generic, and we can do this.
yeah.
Well, give us a little bit more detail about that. If this is what you intend to do, how are you going to implement it? Who needs to be involved? When are you going to implement it? And you can start to do that in the improvement narrative, but we also specifically call that out in the overall reflection where we ask you for an action plan.
Yes. So then with this one is, it was noted that a primary issue with the junior evaluation process was related to a lack of student participation and thought being put into the work. We currently offer faculty mentoring at the student's discretion. However, this process structure needs to be more formalized and intentional with faculty initiating the process. It's expected that the implementation of this initiative will provide additional motivation for student engagement and encourage students to take their artwork more seriously. The faculty will work as a team to research and develop a more formalized and intentional program to be implemented during the fall 2023 semester. So was it clearly articulated? And was it grounded in the results based on what we received, what those results were? And who can control this? Is this something that can be controlled by the faculty? Okay. And it's pretty detailed. We could probably get a little more detailed, but we're gonna leave that alone because we don't have a lot. We want to get through the last couple of slides.
And
Okay.
we have about 4 minutes, so I am going to give the overview of what we are looking for in our overall reflection, the
Yes.
closing the loop portion of things, and just pause there for questions because we've got very
And
little
I
time.
I think this is our last slide.
And no, there are about 3
Oh.
more left.
Oh,
So
okay.
our
They
overall
get
reflection.
examples. They get
Our
them. Yeah.
Got you. So our overall reflection, what we're really trying to drive home here is that this information from our overall reflection, is at the program level. So prior to this, we're looking at the individual measure level, like you were reporting results per measure, an improvement narrative for the measure. But now by the time we get to the overall reflection, tie that all up and talk about what it means for the program.
Mhm.
And this section is really going to be used to close the loop on assessment and to go ahead and develop your assessment plan for your upcoming academic year. So 3 primary goals that we have for the overall reflection. We want you to talk about the overall assessment results for your program and what they mean. You know, what
Only the
lessons did you,
student learning outcomes.
yes. What lessons did you learn? Are there some future assessment opportunities available there? The second part of what we're looking for there, we want you to look back and think about the changes you made in the prior assessment cycle and discuss how they contributed to your success in the current cycle. So there should be, at the very beginning of this, we talked about like reflecting on your results. Part 2 is you kind of reflecting on what we did before, how it impacted what we're doing now, and then what does it mean for where we go in the future. And the third part is we want you to identify exactly where and when you all discussed assessment as a program and how you involve the different stakeholders in your area in the process of making programmatic changes. So if you identify that there were some issues with course sequencing based on your assessment results, and now we need to go back and we either need to revise our existing curriculum map, or hopefully nobody's in this position, create a curriculum map. Well, who's going to be involved? How do we bring them to the table, or how do we plan to bring them to the table? That's the third part of this conversation. Where and when did you discuss assessment within your program as a team? And how did you involve the different stakeholders in that process? Okay, so all of these slides are going to be available on the assessment website. So you can go through, it's just 3 more slides that we won't be able to cover. And they're just an example of what we're looking for in the overall reflection. But if you have any questions that we can quickly answer, please feel free to pose them now. If you are like me and you need to sit and digest this and come back, you can always email us, assessment@famu.edu. You can email me directly. Dr. Walker, can you go to our, I think the last slide has our email addresses on it.
Is it, let me see.
Oh, it's just the
I think
assessment
it's on
email
the-
address,
I think it's on the first one.
the first one. Or you can email us directly if you choose to enter the wilderness that is our email boxes. Go for it.
Do you all see the first slide?
I see it. So I'm assuming that
Okay.
our participants can.
Yeah.
But feel free to reach out to us. Like I said, the recordings and the presentations are going to be available on the assessment website, and our office will send an update email when they become available. You can drop questions in the chat if you want to now, and we'll hang back a couple of minutes to address those. If not, we appreciate your participation today. This has been a really exciting time. And like I said, all of this is possible because of contributions from our assessment community. Folks like Dr. Alexander, Dr. Williams, Maria, when you all come around and ask us these questions and provide this insight, it really drives us to improve as an assessment office, the types of services and resources that we offer. So we appreciate it as always.
We appreciate you. This is very, very
Thank
helpful.
you so much.
Yeah.
So welcome. And we'll be here for a minute.
Thank you very much. While, if I may, can I ask a quick question about, entering the number of students? So basically, in the assessment portal, we have a space where we have to enter what number of face-to-face students were assessed, how many were successful, total number of students, and all that stuff.
Mhm.
So one issue we are facing at engineering is that programs, departments, they tend to do this matrix kind of thing where they're analyzing all the courses in a matrix, and they have the levels of learning and they're rating it as 1, 2, 3. So they're bunching up all courses and then seeing how the performance in each course, and then what is the level of learning in each course. And then if they get a good level of learning, for them, it's like they have achieved their goal, they've satisfied the requirement. Now, the problem is in terms of entering the number of students, the students could be repetitive because you're looking at a bunch of courses where a student could be in 2 or 1 or more courses that are being analyzed, so you can't count all the students as unique students while entering the numbers. So it becomes very tricky for us to actually enter like one number where you say, okay, this is the total number of students assessed and these are the number of successful students. What do you advise in that regard?
So, because I know you all have to do that for both sides, right? You have to provide that breakdown for FSU's reporting and for our reporting.
Now, and here's the thing, like for undergraduate, we have like 250 students and all that. So people do not split it up between FAMU and FSU students. The same reporting happens at FSU and FAMU.
Mhm.
But some of the undergraduate graduate programs might split it as FAMU and FSU students. So I guess wherever they split it, they can specify saying that this pertains to FAMU students only,
Gotcha.
and this pertains to the whole bunch of students.
So if that's going to be an issue that you all face is how the information comes in, then you're going to have to figure out what the meaningful disaggregation would be for you. So that's the first part of it. If that slicing is not available or does not drive how you all make your improvements or how you determine what you're going to move on, then what's the slicing that works for you all? What do you all use when you disaggregate that data? Because you can get into all of that in your narrative portion of your results summary. Now, when you get down into the fields where you have to break down the number of students assessed and successful by the different modalities, then you're going to have to just use zeros and only report total number, but you'll have to get into total number and talk about who is assessed and who is successful. But your result summary should give some sort of disaggregation if you're saying that's not how we break them down this way instead.
Right. The result summary provides details on that. It, where they enumerate, they're saying these are the courses that were evaluated, and these are levels of learning and outcome that we judge them on, and all 80% of the students, basically students in all the courses, they scored 2 out of 3 in terms of the levels of learning outcomes. So we have satisfied the criteria, kind of thing. And then as attachments, they provide the summary matrix on how they evaluated, and the courses and all that stuff.
So when you're breaking down to look for meaning in your data, how do you break it down? Am I hearing that you tell me, how do you break it down? How do you all disaggregate your overall data?
Disaggregate in terms of
so like you
not
have
successful?
Yeah, so you have your measure and your data that you collected around how your students performed on that measure.
Okay.
When you go in there and start slicing it up to determine, okay, what kind of insight can I pull from this? What types of differentiations do you all make between students to figure out what's going on?
No, for example, if it's about knowledge in the field, then, for example, chemical engineering has a list of criteria. They're saying that we want to see this specific aspect to show that they are satisfying knowledge in the field. We're looking for this, we're looking for that. And they have a whole lot of things. For example, the chemical engineering, they meet every year in May or something where each course is evaluated by 2 or 3 other faculty who do not teach that course in detail, with the course binder and all the evidence and everything, to see what is satisfying, what is not satisfying, and everything. So they go through a very detailed process on whether students are satisfying what they expect to see in terms of the critical thinking or communication skills and all the other aspects that ABET requires, all those things. But the way they finally put on the scores is like, okay, they got a 2 out of 3 or a 2.5 out of 3, and so our students are meeting the requirements, and we've analyzed the thing and stuff like that. So I'm finding it, because I got back I got the feedback that we're missing all those numbers, and that's an issue. But now I'm like, I'm not sure how to address this problem now. But
I think we can probably get together and look at how you receive that data and what we're going to do around the reporting to make this work for you.
Okay.
Because beyond just summarizing and saying, okay, in this course, we saw this outcome overall, so we're on track. We're going to want to see you get into some breakdown of what's happening in your data through your analysis. And I'm just trying to go into I was trying to click into an engineering program really quickly to see what the data looked like, but there's about 19 of them, so this is going to take a moment.
Yeah,
but I think we're going to have to get into,
maybe we should schedule we could briefly have a talk first, and then schedule with the pertaining departments to see what they think about this, schedule them with you.
because I think we're going to have to dig in and actually look at the data and then determine where we go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much.
No problem.
It's a very informative session today. Thank you, Dr. Walker, Ms. McTail.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really loved the refresher of it.
All right. Have a good weekend, Dr. Iyer.
Same to you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
You too.
Thank you.
I'm gonna make myself a note to follow up with Dr. Iyer. Hey,
Dr.
wait a
Labossiere.
minute. I've been calling you Dr. Labossiere. Is it Dr. Labossiere?
It's either one is fine. Really, it's my family says that both ways. My mother says Labossiere, my dad says Labossiere. So
Oh, wow.
I don't, as long as people, as long as people call me for dinner on time, I don't care what they
Right,
call me.
don't
It's
say
like-
it, right.
Because you said it, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, that is not
I
how
don't-
I'm pronouncing it.
I don't even know how to pronounce my name correctly. So
Oh,
I just change it up, different times.
I
That's
get a
hilarious.
different name depending on who's talking to me, so.
That's true.
Your presentation with about the method for getting the assessment work done without the money, that was really informative.
I've had a lot of practice, thanks to
Yeah.
Dean Matthews, of getting things done with no
With
no
no
money.
funding.
Mhm.
They say necessity is the mother of invention.
Mhm.
I know, even with GIAC, you do a lot of great work
Yeah,
with
yeah.
nothing
Yep.
but
Well,
hopes
it's
and
Nothing.
dreams.
the letters. I keep bringing in new faculty that, like Dr. Harris and Dr. Taylor, they need the letters. So
Well, if they do the tenure, whatever this new legislation that they're talking about, where they will reassess tenure status, that might help some more too.
yeah, I need to get the law passed that people have to serve on my committee.
Exactly. There you go. There you go.
That's a law I
It'll
could
be
get
a
behind.
recruiting tool.
Mhm.
Yeah,
on
I am spit.
Yeah.
I know, it's only 3:00, but a long day.
Oh my gosh,
I
it feels like
know.
it's 7 o'clock
I
at
know.
night.
I was looking at the
Because-
clock. I'm like, is it time for, time for dinner and to go to sleep? But no, it's
Yes, it is.
just
We
part one.
were in the middle of that presentation, and I don't know if it happens to anybody else, but when I get sleepy, my eyes get sticky.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
my eyes get sticky, and I was like, no, not while I'm presenting.
Not right.
I think
Right.
it was just catching up with me, but
Yeah,
I don't-
today
if
was
you want-
great.
that thank you all for everything, for
Oh, thank you.
presenting multiple times, and just everything that you all do to help keep the assessment office rolling.
Yeah, well,
we're in
thank
this-
you.
Season of transition, so we appreciate your patience and support.
Yep. It's like, so now we just shut down,
Mhm,
rewind and start over again Monday.
mhm. Absolutely. I'll be bothering you about something else on Monday.
I know, right? I'm doing training, Dr. Labossiere, some of what you saw in this presentation,
Mhm.
you're gonna see it again. Your dog says, look, okay.
I know, he's
you
like-
ain't
It's time.
ignoring me
It's
long
time.
enough.
says-
I'll
time
talk
for-
to these people all day long. It is my time.
It's
Right.
time for-
Does he want to go out or
He
he
does-
just wants some love?
he wants, he's probably food, walk, and love. So
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
love.
Well, I'm gonna do us all a favor,
Yeah,
and
it's
I'm
like,
gonna
okay,
end this
Dad,
whole
I'm
session.
done. It's time
Y'all
to go.
stop talking about assessment. Y'all stop thinking about us until the next time I pop up in your inbox asking for something.
Okay.
And you all have a great weekend.
You too now. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.